Welcome, deep divers. Today we're inviting you into a story far grander and truly more influential than you might ever have imagined.
It really is.
We're talking about a civilization that didn't just invent many aspects of our modern world, it survived millennia of invasions, repeatedly transforming its conquerors, and continues to shape geopolitics even today.
Yeah, and often people only think about, the Greeks versus Persians battles.
Exactly. But beyond those familiar clashes, there's this rich tapestry of innovation, tolerance, and an enduring identity that is just utterly fascinating.
It's a narrative of profound resilience and adaptation, which makes it particularly compelling for us to unpack.
Absolutely. So today we're taking a deep dive into the extraordinary history of the Persian Empire.
And we've got some great source material, excerpts from various documentaries, giving different perspectives, lots of rich detail. It really brings this ancient world to life.
It does. Our mission today is to unpack the story of how a seemingly inhospitable plateau became the cradle of one of the largest and, frankly, most sophisticated empires the world has ever known.
We'll uncover some surprising facts, explore its revolutionary approaches to governance and culture, and reveal its lasting legacies that continue to resonate right through to our modern world.
Get ready for some serious aha moments, because this is going to be a journey through time that might just reshape your understanding of history. Let's start right at the beginning. Where do we kick this off?
Okay, so the story of Persia, or what we now know as Iran, it doesn't begin with these grand conquests we often associate with empires. It starts much slower, with a gradual, centuries-long shifting of peoples.
Right, we're talking way back around 1000 BC.
Yeah, around then. As the Bronze Age was giving way to the Iron Age, civilizations like Mesopotamia and Egypt were already ancient by this point, and you have these groups of Indo-Iranian tribes beginning to migrate southward.
And these weren't just random groups wandering around, were they? These were distinct tribal confederations.
That's right. They actually referred to themselves as Aryans, which meant something like the noble ones in their language. They brought with them a shared language, common customs, and a life that was deeply centered around horses and pastoralism.
So not a single invasion force, more like waves of migration.
Exactly. Think of it as a slow, continuous movement of various tribal confederations, sharing related languages and cultural traits. They gradually settled across this vast plateau that would one day bear their name, encompassing modern-day Iran, Afghanistan, and parts of Central Asia.
And this plateau itself, it sounds like a really tough environment. How did that challenging landscape shape their early development?
Oh, it was definitely a land of stark contrasts. You've got towering mountains like the Zagros and Alborz, really formidable barriers. Then you have these vast, forbidding salt deserts. And then nestled among them, these remarkable pockets of fertile valleys.
So that geography must have had a huge influence.
Profoundly. It created natural boundaries between communities, which probably helped foster distinct identities among the various groups settling there. But it also forced an incredible degree of innovation, particularly when it came to basics like agriculture and, crucially, water management.
Okay, so a challenging landscape demanding ingenuity. This brings us to one of the most incredible examples of their early innovation. How did they deal with the scarcity of water in such an arid place?
This is where things get really fascinating. The lack of readily available water became this powerful catalyst for both ingenuity and cooperation among the early settlers. They developed something called qanats.
Qanats, right, also known as Kharez or qanats.
Exactly. Essentially, these were ingenious underground aqueducts, a truly remarkable feat of engineering that honestly stands the test of time.
Underground aqueducts, built thousands of years ago. That sounds incredibly complex for that era. What made them so revolutionary?
They were engineering marvels, no doubt about it. Imagine this. They figured out how to tap into mountain aquifers deep underground and then transport that water, sometimes over many, many kilometers, to their settlements and agricultural fields, all underground.
Wow. So that allowed farming in places that would otherwise be just desert.
Absolutely. It made agriculture possible in seemingly impossible locations. And what's even more remarkable is that some of these qanats, thousands of years later, are still functional today.
That's incredible, a testament to their durability.
And get this technology predated Rome's famous aqueducts by maybe as much as 2,000 years.
2,000 years. So they were channeling massive amounts of water over long distances, and keeping it underground protected it from evaporation.
Right.
That's a huge advantage over open canals.
Precisely. By keeping the water underground, they minimized loss due to evaporation or leakage. It provided a steady, reliable water flow, resistant to war, you couldn't easily poison an underground source, and resistant to floods or seasonal dry spells, unlike surface canals, which are so vulnerable.
Building them must have been incredibly skilled work.
Highly skilled. It required incredibly precise angles for the tunnels. Our sources mention something like a 1-unit drop in elevation for every 100 units horizontally. Just enough slope for flow, but not so much it caused erosion. Too flat, and the water stagnates.
And those vertical shafts you sometimes see images of, like dotted lines across the landscape.
Yeah, those were dug at regular intervals. They provided access for digging the main tunnel, ventilation, and crucially, for maintenance over the centuries. It leaves this unique footprint on the landscape. And it wasn't just practical. Our sources point out that this water management was a powerful symbol of their technological advancement. It was like a carrot they could offer potential allies or subjects, demonstrating what their society was capable of.
Okay, so fast forward a bit. By the 8th century BC, these various migrating Indo-Iranian peoples had started to coalesce into two major distinct groups.
Yes. By this time, you see two prominent groups solidifying, really distinguished by geography, perhaps dialect, and their early political organization. The Medes and the Parsa, who we know as the Persians.
Where were they located relative to each other?
The Medes established themselves mainly in the northwest, in the region south of the Caspian Sea and within the central Zagros Mountains. Their territory was rich in pasture land, which naturally supported their traditions of horse breeding and developing strong cavalry forces. Towns began to emerge around fortified settlements, with Ecbatana, that's modern Hamadan, becoming their principal city.
Ah, Ecbatana. That's the city Herodotus described so vividly, right? With the concentric walls.
That's the one. He described it as having 7 concentric walls, each with battlements of different colors, and the innermost one supposedly plated with silver and gold. Whether that's literal or embellished, it suggests a place of real splendor and power.
And the Parsa, the Persians, where did they settle?
The Parsa inhabited the more arid lands further southwest. In what's now Fars province, the name Persia comes from Parsifars. They became masters of irrigation and dry farming, often building their settlements around those crucial qanat water sources.
And their social structure was maybe a bit different?
It seems they maintained strong tribal structures, focused heavily on kinship bonds and local loyalty. Their initial relative isolation from the big powers of the time, like Assyria down in Mesopotamia, allowed them to develop their distinct identity relatively undisturbed for a while.
But both groups were fundamentally pastoralists who also farmed.
Yes, exactly. Moving between seasonal pastures, but also maintaining permanent settlements in the fertile valleys where they could cultivate crops thanks to irrigation.
Okay, so these early societies, the Medes and the Persians, they weren't just farming in a vacuum. You mentioned Assyria. To their west, there was this massive and frankly terrifying empire looming.
That's absolutely right. To their west lay the powerful Neo-Assyrian Empire. You could argue they were the first true military superpower in history. The Assyrians had formidable iron weapons, a highly professional army, and really ruthless expansionist policies. They cast a long, dark shadow over the entire Near East.
And they knew about the Medes and Persians.
Oh, yes. Assyrian records from as early as the 9th century BC contain the earliest written mentions of both the Medes and the Parsa. Typically, they're mentioned as targets of Assyrian military campaigns or as peoples forced to pay tribute. This highlights the constant threat these Iranian groups faced, and it undoubtedly influenced their own development.
So this constant external pressure from Assyria must have been a major factor in forcing these scattered tribes to think about greater cooperation, maybe even political centralization, just for survival.
It absolutely was. The Medes, being geographically closer to Assyria's borders in Mesopotamia, felt this pressure most acutely. According to Herodotus, our main, though sometimes problematic source for this early period, a leader named Deioces first united the Median tribes into something resembling a kingdom around 700 BC.
Is that story reliable?
Well, whether Deioces was a real historical figure or more legendary is debated, but the general trend holds up. Archaeological evidence certainly confirms that by the late 8th century BC, a more centralized Median society was indeed emerging. We see fortified settlements and clear signs of social stratification, suggesting a move beyond simple tribal structures.
And then Assyria started to weaken.
Exactly. The gradual weakening of Assyria in the 7th century BC provided the Medes with the perfect opportunity. They could assert greater autonomy, maybe even turn the tables.
And this is where Cyaxares comes in.
Precisely. Under the leadership of Cyaxares, who ruled roughly from 625 to 585 BC, the Medes transformed. They went from being a loose confederation of tribes to a formidable kingdom with genuine imperial ambitions.
What made them so formidable?
Cyaxares was a military innovator. He reorganized the Median military along professional lines, apparently dividing his forces into specialized units, spearmen, archers, and cavalry. This military revolution gave the Medes a fighting force capable of challenging even the mighty Assyrians, and it set a precedent that would later heavily influence the Achaemenid military machine.
And then, the seemingly impossible happened. They took on Assyria directly.
In a truly pivotal moment in ancient history, Cyaxares formed an alliance with the Babylonians, who were also chafing under Assyrian rule, led by Nabopolassar. In 612 BC, this Median-Babylonian alliance achieved what had once seemed unthinkable. They stormed and sacked Nineveh, Assyria's great capital.
Wow, the fall of Nineveh. That must have sent shockwaves.
Throughout the ancient world, it marked the definitive end of Assyrian dominance and loudly announced the arrival of new powers on the international stage. The Medes carved out a significant empire for themselves, claiming the northern portions of the former Assyrian territories, extending their rule across northern Mesopotamia and into eastern Anatolia.
Okay, so the Medes are now a major power. What about the Parsa, the Persians, during this time? How did they fit into this new Median order?
Under Median hegemony, the Parsa, or the Persian tribes, remained in a subordinate position. They were likely allies, perhaps even vassals in some sense. Their own local leaders maintained authority within their territories and fars, but they acknowledged Median overlordship.
So an alliance, but definitely not an equal one.
Exactly. And this complex relationship, Persians allied but subordinate to the Medes, would prove fateful for the future of the entire Near East. The Median Empire, though relatively short-lived compared to what came next, was crucial. It established vital precedents for later state-building in the region. It showed that these Iranian peoples could not only resist the traditional powers of Mesopotamia, but could also create their own sophisticated imperial systems, blending their own styles with useful Mesopotamian influences. Ecbatana, the Median capital, became renowned for its splendor, a worthy rival to the great cities of Mesopotamia.
And what an act it was. The stage was truly set now for the rise of the Achaemenid Empire, the one most people think of when they hear Persian Empire.
Absolutely. The Medes laid the groundwork, but the next phase was even more dramatic.
Our sources say that few could have predicted that a prince from this subordinate tribe, the Parsa, would go on to create the largest empire the world had yet seen. This leader was, of course, Cyrus the Great.
Cyrus, yes. Born into the ruling family of Anshan, which was a region within Pars, or Persia proper. He was, initially it seems, a minor king, technically paying tribute to the Median king, Astyages.
His early life is a bit murky, isn't it? Lots of legends.
Very much so. Greek sources, especially Herodotus, give us this dramatic story about him being the grandson of Astyages, ordered to be killed as an infant but saved and raised by a shepherd, classic hero myth stuff.
Right. But there are other sources.
Native sources, like Babylonian records and later Persian traditions, portray him more straightforwardly as a legitimate prince of the Achaemenid lineage, a powerful family that had ruled in southwestern Iran for generations, acknowledging Median overlordship but with considerable autonomy. The Achaemenids were a known quantity.
Okay, so whatever the exact details of his birth and early life, Cyrus emerges as the ruler of Anshan around 559 BC. And the first big decisive step was his rebellion against Median rule.
Yes. Again, accounts differ on the exact trigger. Herodotus paints Astyages as a tyrant whose cruelty provoked the revolt. Babylonian records hint that Cyrus might have been chosen by his own troops, sensing weakness in the Median leadership. Whatever the cause, around 550 BC, Cyrus and his Persian forces confronted the Median army, which was probably larger.
And Cyrus won.
He did. But here's where Cyrus truly showed his revolutionary approach, something that set him apart. After capturing Ecbatana, the Median capital, he did not sack the city or slaughter its inhabitants, which was standard operating procedure for conquerors in that age.
So he didn't act like a typical conqueror at all. What did he do instead, and why was this so groundbreaking?
Instead of destruction, he presented himself not as a foreign invader, but as a legitimate successor to the Median throne. He made a point of respecting Median traditions, Median gods, and crucially incorporating the Median nobility and soldiers into his new realm as partners rather than subjugated peoples.
Partners, not subjects.
That's a key difference.
A fundamental difference. This policy of imperial integration through respect and partnership, rather than just brute force and terror like the Assyrians, became a hallmark of Achaemenid rule. It was a key factor in the remarkable stability and longevity of the empire he was starting to build. It offered a new model, rule by consent, or at least accommodation and co-option.
It sounds almost enlightened for its time. But this new vision faced immediate challenges. King Croesus of Lydia, over in western Anatolia, famous for his immense wealth. Legendary wealth, yeah. Croesus saw the fall of Media as both a threat and an opportunity. He famously consulted the oracle at Delphi before attacking Cyrus. The oracle gave him that classic ambiguous answer. If Croesus went to war, a great empire would fall.
He assumed it meant Cyrus's empire.
Tragically, yes. He failed to consider it might be his own. He attacked, and Cyrus once again demonstrated his military skill and maybe unconventional thinking.
How so?
Cyrus launched a surprise winter campaign into Lydian territory. Most armies didn't campaign in winter back then. It caught Croesus completely off guard. Then, at the decisive battle near Sardis, the Lydian capital, Cyrus employed this clever tactic. He put camels at the front of his battle line.
Camels? Why camels?
Apparently, the unfamiliar smell and appearance of the camels terrified the renowned Lydian cavalry horses. They bolted, disrupting the Lydian charge and allowing the Persian infantry to gain the upper hand and secure victory.
Brilliant. And did he treat Croesus harshly?
Again, Cyrus showed remarkable clemency. Accounts vary on Croesus's exact fate. Some say he became an advisor to Cyrus, but Lydia wasn't destroyed. Cyrus preserved local Lydian institutions, respected their religious practices, and incorporated Lydian nobles into his administration. He was establishing a pattern: conquer, integrate, respect.
So after securing Media and Lydia, consolidating his western flank, he turned his attention east.
That's right. For several years, Cyrus campaigned extensively to the east and northeast. He subdued powerful regions like Bactria, Sogdiana, and Parthia areas in modern Afghanistan and Central Asia. He reached, it seems, at least to the borders of India. These campaigns secured the empire's eastern frontiers and brought incredibly valuable resources and trade routes under his control. But the greatest prize still remained. Babylon. The ancient center of Mesopotamian civilization, an immensely powerful and wealthy city. Taking Babylon was the ultimate challenge, the capstone to his empire. Yet, remarkably, he managed to take it without a bloody, protracted siege.
How did he achieve that? It had massive walls, didn't it?
It did. King Nabonidus of Babylon had, let's say, made himself unpopular, particularly with the powerful priesthood of Marduk, the city's chief god. Cyrus cleverly exploited this internal dissent. He marched his armies toward Babylon in the autumn of 539 BC. After defeating Nabonidus's main field army at Opis, the path to the city itself lay open.
But the walls were still a huge obstacle.
Huge! Babylon could have withstood a siege for years. Cyrus achieved this relatively bloodless victory through a combination of military ingenuity and astute political maneuvering. His forces famously diverted the Euphrates River, which flowed through the city, lowering its level enough for his soldiers to wade under the massive river gates in the walls.
Wow. But there was more to it than just that trick.
Oh, yes. Perhaps more importantly, Cyrus had already been conducting a kind of propaganda campaign. He portrayed himself not as a destroyer, but as the chosen one of Marduk, come to restore proper worship, justice, and order to Babylon, liberating them from the impious Nabonidus. He essentially won the hearts and minds of many influential Babylonians before his army even arrived.
So the gates were open from the inside, essentially.
It seems the city offered little to no resistance. The Achaemenid army entered Babylon peacefully. It was one of history's most remarkable conquests, achieved with minimal bloodshed, and with Babylon came all of Mesopotamia and its crucial trade routes, firmly under Achaemenid control.
And this is where the famous Cyrus Cylinder comes in. It's often hailed as one of the earliest declarations of human rights. What does it actually say?
Yes, the Cyrus Cylinder. It's a small clay document inscribed in Babylonian cuneiform. It's essentially a royal proclamation. In it, Cyrus presents himself, again, as chosen by Marduk to bring justice to Babylon. He describes restoring temples that Nabonidus had neglected, returning sacred statues and objects to their rightful cities, and crucially, permitting various peoples who had been displaced or exiled by previous Babylonian kings to return to their homelands.
Including the Jewish people exiled from Judah.
Exactly. Among these groups were the Jews. Their return is famously documented in the Hebrew Bible, where Cyrus is praised, even called God's anointed, for allowing them to go back to Judah and rebuild their temple in Jerusalem.
But was this special treatment just for the Jews?
That's the key point. The cylinder reveals it wasn't. This permission to return home seems to have been part of a broader, consistent policy applied to all diverse peoples within his rapidly expanding realm. It showed a fundamental shift from previous empires that often sought to crush difference or forcibly relocate populations. Cyrus aimed to manage diversity, to allow people their traditions as long as they acknowledged his overall authority.
So what does this all tell us about the Achaemenid imperial system he was building? How did he manage such a vast, diverse empire? And why was it seemingly so stable, at least initially?
The genius of the system, as established by Cyrus, really lay in this delicate balance he struck between central authority and local autonomy. The empire was divided into large provinces called satrapies.
Governed by satrap.
Right, each governed by a satrap, usually an Iranian noble, often related to the king. The satrap was responsible for collecting taxes, maintaining law and order, and raising troops when needed. But, and this is crucial within this broad framework, local practices, religions, languages, and customs were generally respected and allowed to continue.
So as long as you paid your taxes and didn't rebel.
Pretty much. As long as a province remained peaceful and paid its assigned tribute, its people could largely govern their daily lives according to their own traditions. This minimized resistance to imperial rule. It made conquest less disruptive for the conquered and significantly reduced the costs, both financial and human, of maintaining control over these vast territories. It fostered what historians often call the Pax Persica, a period of unprecedented peace, stability, and prosperity across a huge swath of the ancient world.
And he also established a new capital, Pasargadae, in his homeland.
Yes, he established his capital at Pasargadae in his native Pars. He built a complex of palaces and audience halls. What's interesting about the architecture is that it deliberately blended elements from the various cultures now united under his rule. Median, Lydian, Babylonian, Egyptian influences are all visible. It was a physical symbol of the inclusive nature of the empire itself.
And the gardens there were famous.
Yes, the showpiece was its magnificent park and vast formal gardens. Among them was perhaps the first known example of the paradisia, these carefully planned, four-quartered, walled Persian gardens with precise water channels running through them. This design laid the foundations for garden design that would influence cultures across the world for millennia. Even the word paradise ultimately derives from this old Persian concept.
Cyrus died around 530 BC. The exact circumstances are a bit disputed, right? But his legacy is undeniable.
His death is unclear. Herodotus has him dying heroically in battle against the Massagetei tribes in Central Asia. Other sources suggest a more peaceful death. But his tomb still stands near Pasargadae. It's remarkably simple for such a great king, a gabled stone chamber atop a 6-step platform. It was tended by Magi Zoroastrian priests for centuries. Even Alexander the Great, centuries later, when he conquered Persia, paid homage there and ordered repairs.
A sign of respect, even from his conqueror.
Absolutely. Cyrus left behind a realm stretching from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to the Indus River in India, the largest political entity the world had yet seen. But more importantly, he established this revolutionary model of imperial rule based on tolerance, integration, and inclusion, rather than just oppression and forced assimilation.
Even the Greeks admired him, didn't they? Despite their later conflicts with Persia.
They did. Writers like Xenophon regarded him as an ideal monarch, and the Roman Empire, later on, would adopt many Achaemenid innovations in governance and administration. In modern Iran, he's celebrated as the father of the nation. And that replica of his cylinder at the UN headquarters is honored as perhaps the world's first charter of human rights, recognizing principles of good governance, respect for diverse cultures, and rule by consent. A truly remarkable figure.
Truly. And then his son, Cambyses II, stepped onto the throne, inheriting this revolutionary concept of empire, and immediately turning his gaze towards the last great independent power in the region, Egypt.
That's right. When Cyrus died, his eldest son, Cambyses, smoothly ascended to the throne. He wasn't inexperienced. He'd served as regent of Babylon, so he had valuable administrative background. Now, there might have been some initial consolidation needed, possibly neutralizing his brother, Bardia, but his main focus quickly became Egypt.
Egypt, the land of the pharaohs, the last great independent civilization in the Near East at that point.
Exactly. And the timing for Cambyses from a strategic perspective sounds like it was absolutely perfect.
So?
Well, the long-reigning pharaoh Amasis, who had ruled Egypt for over 40 years, died in 526 BC. He left his son, Psamtik III, an untested ruler, to face what was arguably the greatest military threat Egypt had seen in generations.
So a moment of potential weakness in Egypt.
Precisely. The invasion began in 525 BC. The Achaemenid army marched along the Mediterranean coast, crucially supported by a powerful fleet composed of ships from their subjects, particularly the Phoenicians and the Ionian Greeks.
Logistics must have been key again, crossing the Sinai Desert.
Huge challenge. Cambyses showed incredible logistical brilliance, much like his father. A vital piece was an alliance with a man named Phanes of Halicarnassus, a Greek mercenary captain who had defected from the Egyptian side and provided crucial intelligence about the terrain and Egyptian defenses. And then, in a feat of logistical genius, Cambyses arranged for Arab allies to help the army navigate the harsh Sinai Desert by supplying water carried in thousands of animal skin containers loaded onto camels.
Incredible foresight. And the invasion itself.
After crossing the Sinai, there was a fierce battle near the frontier city of Pelusium. The Egyptian lines eventually broke. Memphis, the ancient capital, fell after a relatively brief siege, and the unfortunate pharaoh Psamtik III was captured. Though initially treated with respect, according to Herodotus, he was later executed for plotting a rebellion.
So by 525 BC, Egypt becomes another satrapy.
Yes, the Achaemenid Empire absorbed the world's oldest continuing civilization. But again, look at how Cambyses handled it. He adopted the full titles and regalia of an Egyptian pharaoh.
He became pharaoh.
In title and presentation, yes. He presented himself to his new Egyptian subjects as a legitimate successor to the ancient line of kings. We have Egyptian temple inscriptions from his reign showing him making traditional offerings to Egyptian gods like Apis. It demonstrates that same remarkable cultural flexibility, that willingness to adapt to local traditions of kingship rather than just imposing foreign customs. It's a continuation of Cyrus's policy of integration.
But classical sources, particularly Herodotus, paint a very different picture of Cambyses in Egypt, don't they? Tales of madness, sacrilege.
They do. Herodotus is full of stories portraying Cambyses as unstable, cruel, committing acts of sacrilege like killing the sacred Apis bull, desecrating royal tombs, mocking Egyptian customs.
How accurate are those accounts likely to be? Could it be Greek bias against the Persians again?
Modern historians generally take a more nuanced view. It's highly probable that Greek chroniclers, writing from a perspective often hostile to Persia, exaggerated or misinterpreted his actions to fit their narrative of the mad Eastern despot. For instance, archaeological evidence actually suggests Cambyses continued the tradition of reverence for the Apis bull. There are records of an Apis bull being properly buried during his reign, and he seems to have supported the powerful Egyptian temple establishments, not alienated them wholesale.
So perhaps not the madman Herodotus made him out to be. Did he have further ambitions beyond Egypt?
He certainly did. There were plans for expeditions against Carthage in North Africa, but those were abandoned when the Phoenician fleet, who formed the backbone of his navy, refused to sail against their own colony. He also campaigned south into Nubia, or Ethiopia as the Greeks called it, achieving some success, likely pushing Persian influence beyond the first cataract of the Nile. There's also a famous, possibly legendary, story from Herodotus about an entire Persian army being lost in a sandstorm while trying to march to the Oracle of Ammon at the Siwa Oasis.
A lost army in the desert.
Yeah.
Dramatic stuff. And then his reign ended rather abruptly and mysteriously, plunging the empire into its first major crisis.
Yes. After nearly 3 years consolidating control in Egypt, news reached Cambyses of serious trouble back home. A man claiming to be his brother, Bardia, who Cambyses may or may not have had secretly killed earlier, had apparently seized the throne in Persia. Cambyses immediately started racing back to deal with this usurper.
And he never made it back.
He died en route in 522 BC. The circumstances are murky. Herodotus claims he accidentally wounded himself with his own dagger, perhaps while mounting his horse, and the wound became infected. Other native traditions suggest he died at Damascus or somewhere in Syria. Whatever the cause, his death was sudden. Crucially, he had no son, and with the legitimacy of the man on the throne back in Persia highly questionable, the empire faced its first true succession crisis. Everything Cyrus had built suddenly seemed threatened with unraveling.
And into that chaos stepped Darius I, who we know as the Great. He really had to fight to stabilize the empire after that rocky period, didn't he?
He absolutely did. Into this moment of profound uncertainty stepped Darius. Now, Darius wasn't a son of Cyrus or Cambyses. He was a distant cousin from a collateral branch of the Achaemenid royal family. He had served in Cambyses' elite royal guard, the Immortals.
So his claim wasn't straightforward.
Not at all. The situation was incredibly confused. There was this figure on the throne back in Persia claiming to be Bardia, Cambyses' brother. Whether this was the genuine prince or an impostor, a Magian priest named Gaumata, as Darius himself later claimed in his official inscriptions, is still debated by historians.
So Darius had to establish his own legitimacy. How did he do that?
He moved quickly and decisively. According to his own account, immortalized on the famous Behistun inscription, this massive multilingual text carved high on a cliff face in western Iran, Darius led a conspiracy of 7 prominent noble Persian families against this alleged usurper, Gaumata Bardia. They killed him, and Darius claimed the throne.
Just like that, was it accepted?
Not quite. To solidify his claim, he also pragmatically married Atassa, the daughter of Cyrus the Great and widow of Cambyses. This linked him directly to the founder's line. But even with this, his accession was far from universally accepted. Rebellions erupted all across the vast empire, from Babylon and Mesopotamia to Media, Armenia, Elam, Parthia, even Egypt and Bactria. It seemed the whole empire was falling apart.
So he had to immediately fight to hold it together.
Incredibly so. The Behistun inscription itself lists it. Darius claims he fought an astonishing 19 battles against 9 different self-proclaimed kings, all within a single year after taking the throne. It shows immense military skill, ruthless determination, and an unwavering will to preserve the unity of the empire his predecessors had built. He literally had to reconquer large parts of it.
An incredible feat just to survive and hold the throne. But he became known as the Great, not just for winning battles, but because he was an administrative genius who truly standardized and organized the empire.
Exactly. Once he had secured his throne, Darius proved to be an absolute organizational mastermind. He took the somewhat loosely organized collection of territories inherited from Cyrus and Cambyses and transformed it into a much more coherent, efficiently run state with standardized systems for everything: governance, taxation, communication, law.
How did he refine the satrapy system?
He formalized it, dividing the empire into approximately 20 large provinces, or satrapies. Each satrapy still had a governor, the satrap, but Darius seems to have introduced a more complex system of checks and balances. Often, the military commander in the province reported separately to the king, as did a chief financial officer or imperial secretary. This prevented any one satrap from concentrating too much power in his own hands.
And didn't he have special inspectors, the eyes and ears of the king?
Yes, that was another layer of oversight. These were trusted royal officials, sometimes including members of the royal family who traveled throughout the realm, often unannounced. Their job was to monitor the conduct of the satraps and other officials, listen to grievances, and report directly back to Darius at the royal court. It was a clever way to maintain central control and keep tabs on potential corruption or rebellion in the far-flung provinces.
And he tackled the tribute system too, made it more predictable.
He did. Instead of the somewhat ad hoc tribute demands of the past, Darius instituted a fixed annual tax system. Each satrapy was assessed based on its resources and productive capacity, and had to pay a set amount, usually in silver or gold, but sometimes in kind, like horses from Armenia or grain from Egypt. We have records suggesting Babylon, being the richest province, paid the equivalent of something like 25 tons of silver annually, plus other goods. This provided the empire with a predictable and stable revenue stream.
And he introduced the first standardized currency system spanning multiple continents. That must have been revolutionary for trade.
Absolutely revolutionary. He introduced the gold daric coin, bearing his image as an archer, and the silver siglos. This was the first time a standardized currency system with reliable weights and purity guaranteed by the state was used across such a vast territory, stretching from the Aegean Sea to India. He also standardized weights and measures across the empire. All of this greatly facilitated trade, commerce, and economic integration across his diverse realms.
But his vision went beyond just administration and finance. He was an audacious builder too, wasn't he? Like the Royal Road.
Oh, the Royal Road was an incredible undertaking. A massive, stone-paved highway stretching over 2,500 kilometers. That's about 1,500 miles, all the way from Sardis, near the Aegean coast in western Anatolia, to Susa, one of the main administrative capitals in southwestern Iran.
And it had relay stations.
Yeah.
Like an ancient Pony Express.
Exactly. It was linked by a network of 111 fortified rest stations positioned roughly every 18 miles or so. Fresh horses and riders were kept ready at each station. This allowed official couriers carrying royal messages to travel the entire length of the road in about 7 to 9 days. An incredible speed for the time, a journey that would take a regular traveler on foot or by caravan about 3 months.
That must have transformed communication and control.
Massively. It allowed for rapid transmission of intelligence, decrees, and administrative orders across the empire. It became a model for efficient imperial communication for centuries.
And our sources mention another incredible engineering feat, a precursor to the Suez Canal, Darius's Canal.
Yes, this is truly surprising but documented. He ordered the construction, or possibly the renovation and completion of an earlier pharaoh's attempt, of a giant canal linking the Mediterranean Sea via the Nile River Delta to the Red Sea. It apparently took 7 years to build, utilizing Egyptian labor. It demonstrated advanced Persian hydraulic knowledge and allowed ships to sail directly between the Mediterranean world and the Indian Ocean, or at least be dragged across shallower sections. A remarkable feat connecting continents long before the modern Suez Canal.
And then there's Persepolis. He started building this magnificent ceremonial capital. What was its purpose? It wasn't the main administrative center, was it?
No, administration was mainly handled from Susa, Babylon, and Ecbatana. Darius chose a new site, Persepolis meaning Persian city in Greek near modern Shiraz in the heartland of Pars, for his ceremonial capital. Construction began around 518 BC. It was built on a vast, imposing stone platform built against a mountain backdrop.
And the architecture was spectacular.
Absolutely breathtaking, even in ruins today. The complex featured massive columned audience halls, like the Apadana and the Hall of 100 Columns. The columns themselves were incredibly tall, some over 60 feet, with perfectly vertical shafts and precise fluting. The most famous features are perhaps the intricate stone staircases decorated with these stunning reliefs depicting processions of tribute-bearing delegates from all across the empire.
Showing all the different peoples of the empire coming together.
Exactly. You see representations of 23 different subject nations: Medes, Elamites, Babylonians, Lydians, Egyptians, Indians, Scythians, Greeks, Ethiopians, each distinguished by their characteristic dress and the gifts they bring. Persepolis wasn't just a palace. It was a grand symbolic statement of the empire's immense wealth, its unity, and its ideology of incorporating diverse peoples under the rule of the great king. The architecture itself skillfully blended elements from Egypt, Babylon, Lydia, Greece, and other parts of the empire into a uniquely Persian imperial style.
So he consolidated, organized, built. But he also expanded the empire and eventually came into conflict with the Greeks.
He did. Darius extended imperial control eastward into northwestern India, conquering the Indus Valley, which became the wealthy satrapy of Hindush. He also campaigned north against the nomadic Scythian tribes across the Danube River in Europe. Most famously, he led a major expedition into Europe, crossing the Bosphorus Strait between Asia and Europe on a specially constructed bridge of boats built by his Ionian Greek subjects, ironically. This campaign established a permanent Persian presence in Thrace across the Aegean Sea from mainland Greece.
And the conflict with the Greek city-states started with the Ionian Revolt?
Yes. The Ionian Greek cities along the western coast of Anatolia, which had been under Persian rule since Cyrus's time, rebelled against Persian authority in 499 BC. They were encouraged and actively supported by Athens and Eretria, cities on the Greek mainland.
That must have angered Darius.
Deeply. Though the revolt was eventually suppressed after several years of hard fighting, Darius was furious at the interference from Athens and Eretria. This provocation led directly to Persia's first serious military intervention in mainland Greece. In 490 BC, Darius sent an imperial expeditionary force across the Aegean Sea.
Aimed directly at Athens and Eretria.
Exactly. They sacked Eretria, then landed on the coast near Athens at a place called Marathon. The Persian force was significantly larger than the Athenian army that met them.
But Marathon didn't go according to plan for the Persians.
Not at all. Despite their numerical superiority, the Persian forces suffered a stunning and decisive defeat at the hands of the heavily armed Athenian hoplite infantry. The Battle of Marathon was an unexpected setback for the Persians. While it wasn't an existential threat to the vast Achaemenid Empire, it was a blow to imperial prestige and marked the beginning of this long, complex, and often mythologized confrontation between the Persian East and the Greek West.
And Darius didn't get a chance to respond to Marathon.
He was planning a new, much larger campaign to avenge the defeat at Marathon and punish Athens definitively. But while preparing for this and also dealing with a rebellion that broke out in Egypt, Darius died in 486 BC. He did manage to ensure a smooth succession, though. He designated his son, Xerxes, born to Queen Atossa, as his heir, avoiding the kind of chaos that followed Cyrus's and Cambyses' deaths. He left behind an empire that was arguably at the peak of its power, with sophisticated institutions, vast wealth, and unprecedented prosperity.
His legacy seems immense, creating a model of imperial governance that lasted centuries.
Immense. Darius created a system so effective that it endured with relatively minor modifications for another 2 centuries under his successors. It was admired and adopted in parts by later empires, including Alexander, the Romans, and even much later entities like the British East India Company. His reign truly represented the culmination of Cyrus's concept of a universal empire, one where diverse peoples could maintain their cultural and religious identities within a common imperial framework. In that Behistun inscription, he famously presented himself as the enemy of the lie and the champion of the truth, reflecting the sophisticated understanding that legitimate authority needed a moral foundation, not just military might.
A very sophisticated concept of rule. And then his son, Xerxes I, took the throne, inheriting his massive, powerful empire, but also inheriting his father's unfinished business with the Greeks.
Exactly. Xerxes, whose name apparently meant something like ruling over heroes, inherited an empire at its absolute zenith. But he also inherited that specific mission to finally deal with the Greeks and avenge the humiliation of Marathon. He was groomed for leadership. And importantly, through his mother, Atassa, who was the daughter of Cyrus the Great, Xerxes united the 2 main branches of the Achaemenid dynasty, which gave him a particularly strong claim to legitimacy.
Did he face immediate challenges when he took power?
His first few years focused on consolidating authority. Egypt had rebelled late in Darius's reign, so Xerxes moved swiftly to reconquer it, and by all accounts he imposed a harsher rule there than his predecessors had. Babylon also attempted revolt early in his reign. This time, the Persian response was severe. Some major temples were apparently destroyed, and crucially, the revered golden statue of Marduk, Babylon's chief god, was removed from the city and possibly melted down. This was a significant departure from the generally more accommodating religious policies of Cyrus and Darius.
So maybe a sign of a less tolerant approach, or just dealing firmly with rebellion?
Hard to say for sure, but it suggests a shift. Once these internal matters were settled, Xerxes turned his full attention west, towards Greece. The defeat at Marathon was a lingering stain on imperial prestige, and these fiercely independent, quarrelsome Greek city-states on the empire's fringe posed a potential long-term threat if left unchecked.
And the preparations for this second invasion of Greece were on an absolutely unprecedented scale, weren't they? Dwarfing his father's attempt.
Completely unprecedented. For about 4 years, resources flowed from every corner of the vast empire. An enormous fleet was built, gathering ships from Phoenicia, Egypt, Cyprus, and the Greek cities already under Persian rule in Asia Minor. Troops were levied from dozens of different subject nations: Egyptians, Babylonians, Medes, Persians themselves, of course, Bactrians from Central Asia, Scythians, Indians, Ethiopians, Lydians, Thracians. It was an incredibly diverse army, though perhaps of uneven quality and motivation.
Herodotus gives these fantastical numbers. Millions of men.
Yeah, Herodotus claims over 2 million fighting men, plus support personnel, making a total of over 5 million people. Those numbers are certainly wild exaggerations, typical of ancient accounts. But even conservative modern estimates suggest Xerxes assembled a land army of perhaps 100,000 to 200,000 fighters, plus tens of thousands more in the fleet and support roles. Easily the largest, most complex military force assembled anywhere in the world up to that time.
And the engineering feats involved were just staggering, like bridging the Hellespont.
Absolutely staggering. To avoid the treacherous seas around the Mount Athos Peninsula where a previous Persian fleet had been wrecked, Xerxes ordered a canal to be dug right across the isthmus. An incredible feat completed in about 6 months. But the greatest challenge was getting his massive land army from Asia into Europe. He needed to cross the Hellespont Strait, that's the Dardanelles today, which is about 1.5 miles wide at its narrowest point.
So how did they do it?
He ordered 2 massive pontoon bridges to be built side by side. Hundreds of ships, anchored securely and lashed together with massive cables made of flax and papyrus, formed the foundation. Wooden planks were laid across them, creating a stable roadway wide enough for the army to march across.
And the famous story about him whipping the sea.
Right. When a storm destroyed the first set of bridges before they were completed, Herodotus tells us Xerxes flew into a rage. He supposedly ordered the Hellespont itself to be whipped 300 times with chains, had fetters thrown into the water, and even had it branded with hot irons while his men cursed the sea.
Which the Greeks saw as insane hubris.
Exactly. To the Greeks, it seemed like the act of a mad tyrant trying to punish nature. However, some modern scholars suggest it might have been a misunderstood Persian religious ritual, perhaps intended to ritually tame or propitiate the waters before the second successful attempt to build the bridges was made. Regardless, the rebuilt bridges held, and his massive army spent 7 days and nights marching continuously into Europe. It must have been an awe-inspiring, terrifying sight.
And this massive force marching into Greece led to one of the most famous last stands in history, Thermopylae.
As the Persian army moved south through northern Greece, most Greek cities, understandably intimidated, submitted without a fight. They offered the symbolic gifts of earth and water, acknowledging Persian overlordship. But Sparta and Athens, the two leading powers of southern Greece, defiantly refused. A small allied Greek force, led by King Leonidas of Sparta and his famous 300 Spartan warriors, decided to make a stand at Thermopylae.
A narrow pass, ideal for defense.
A very narrow coastal pass where the mountains came right down to the sea. It was the main route into central Greece. For 3 days, this small Greek force managed to hold off the vastly superior Persian numbers, inflicting heavy casualties. It was a tactical masterpiece of using terrain to negate numbers. Eventually, the Persians found a way around the pass thanks to a local trader and overwhelmed the defenders.
But Thermopylae became legendary.
While technically a Persian military victory that opened the path south, Thermopylae became an incredibly powerful symbol of Greek courage and resistance against overwhelming odds, a story that still resonates today.
With the path open, Xerxes marched south and captured Athens.
Yes. With the pass at Thermopylae forced, the road to southern Greece lay open. Xerxes marched into Attica, captured Athens, which had been largely evacuated, and burned the city, including the temples on the Acropolis. This fulfilled his primary objective, punishing Athens for its role in the Ionian Revolt and the defeat at Marathon.
But then, disaster struck at sea for the Persians. Salamis.
Precisely. The Athenian leader, Themistocles, had persuaded the allied Greeks to stake everything on a naval battle. He lured the larger, heavier Persian fleet into the narrow straits between the island of Salamis and the mainland near Athens. In those confined waters, the Persian numerical advantage became a liability. Their ships couldn't maneuver effectively. The smaller, more agile Greek triremes, particularly the Athenian ones, were able to outfight them, ramming and sinking over 200 Persian vessels.
And Xerxes watched this unfold.
Apparently, yes. Herodotus says Xerxes watched the destruction of his fleet from a golden throne set up on a hillside overlooking the bay. It was a catastrophic defeat for the Persians, crippling their naval power and jeopardizing the supply lines for their massive army in Greece.
Did that end the invasion?
Not immediately, but it was the turning point. Following the naval disaster at Salamis, Xerxes decided to return to Asia with a significant portion of his army. He left his general, Mardonius, a highly capable commander, with a large elite force to continue the campaign and attempt to subjugate Greece the following year.
But Mardonius wasn't successful either.
No. The following spring, in 479 BC, the combined forces of the Greek city-states, led by the Spartans, met Mardonius's army on the plains near Plataea. In a large-scale land battle, the Greeks won a decisive victory, killing Mardonius and routing the Persian army. On the very same day, according to tradition, the remnants of the Persian fleet were destroyed by the Greeks at the Battle of Mycale on the coast of Asia Minor. These twin defeats effectively ended direct Persian attempts to conquer mainland Greece.
So these were significant setbacks, a failure to achieve the ultimate goal of conquering Greece. But our sources emphasize that these weren't existential threats to the vast Persian Empire itself. What did Xerxes focus on after these campaigns?
That's a crucial point. While the failure in Greece was a blow to prestige and marked the limits of Persian expansion westward, the vast Achaemenid realm continued to function effectively. Its central provinces, its economic heartland, remained untouched by the distant conflict. Xerxes himself, though undoubtedly disappointed by the outcome of his European adventure, returned to the imperial core. He focused his energies on other matters, particularly completing the magnificent construction programs at Persepolis that his father, Darius, had begun.
Like the Hall of 100 Columns.
Exactly. He oversaw the completion of massive structures like the Hall of 100 Columns and his own palace complex at Persepolis, adding intricate reliefs and inscriptions that continued to showcase imperial power, wealth, and the multicultural integration of the empire. Work also seems to have continued on other infrastructure projects like canals and roads in other parts of the empire. Life in the imperial heartland went on, prosperous and largely stable.
However, beneath that impressive facade, were there subtle signs that the empire was facing challenges, maybe starting a slow decline?
Yes, some subtle signs began to emerge. The extremely costly Greek campaign had undoubtedly drained the imperial treasury, likely requiring increased taxation across the provinces, which could breed resentment. There are also hints that court life grew increasingly insular during Xerxes' later reign. He seems to have appeared less frequently in public, becoming a more remote figure. As a result, more power inevitably concentrated in the hands of palace officials, particularly high-ranking eunuchs who controlled access to the king and perhaps the influential women of the royal harem.
And his reign, like Cambyses, ended violently. It seems palace conspiracies were becoming a recurring problem for the Yemenids.
It does seem that way. In 465 BC, after ruling for about 2 decades, Xerxes fell victim to a palace conspiracy. The plot was apparently led by Artabanus, the commander of the royal bodyguard, a position of immense trust and proximity to the king, possibly in collaboration with a powerful eunuch chamberlain named Aspermitus. They assassinated Xerxes in his bedchamber.
And they tried to cover it up.
They cleverly framed Xerxes' eldest son and heir, Darius, for the murder and had him swiftly executed. They then placed a younger, perhaps more pliable son, Artaxerxes, on the throne, likely hoping to rule through him.
So Xerxes' legacy is complex. Grand building projects, but also the failure in Greece and an end shrouded in intrigue.
Very complex. His reign left important legacies, particularly the massive building projects at Persepolis, which remain some of the most impressive monuments of the ancient world, showcasing imperial power and that ideal of multicultural integration. The sophisticated administrative systems established by his father continued to function effectively. Perhaps most significantly, the ultimate failure of the Greek campaign led to a crucial strategic reorientation for the empire. Future relations with the Greek world would increasingly rely on diplomacy, political maneuvering, funding rival Greek factions, playing them off against each other, and bribery, a generally more subtle and cost-effective approach than direct, large-scale military invasion.
Less risky, too.
Much less risky. Of course, Greek writers, looking back, often portrayed Xerxes as the archetypal, arrogant Eastern despot blinded by hubris. But that's a simplistic caricature that really neglects the immense complexity and challenges of ruling the ancient world's largest, most diverse political entity.
So the empire continued after Xerxes, but the seeds of eventual decline seem to have been sown increasing succession struggles, the growing power and autonomy of provincial governors, the satraps. What came next in this long tale of the later Achaemenid rulers?
After Xerxes, we enter a period of about 130 years with rulers like Artaxerxes I, Darius II, Artaxerxes II, and Artaxerxes III, right down to the final king, Darius III. During this time, the empire navigated a complex landscape. It remained vast and materially prosperous for much of this period, but it faced growing internal challenges and increasing external pressures.
Artaxerxes I took the throne after the assassination of his father, Xerxes. How did he handle things?
Artaxerxes I, who had to eliminate his father's assassins, including Artabanus, to secure his own rule, inherited an empire still fundamentally strong. However, challenges emerged quickly. Egypt, always a somewhat restive province, launched a major rebellion led by a figure named Inaros, and crucially, this rebellion was actively supported by Athens, which sent a fleet and troops.
Athens interfering again.
Yes, revealing both persistent provincial discontent in Egypt and ongoing Athenian ambition to challenge Persian power. Artaxerxes eventually managed to suppress the revolt after years of fighting, but significantly, rather than launching another costly direct assault on mainland Greece, he employed that newer strategy, sophisticated diplomacy backed by gold. He channeled financial support to Sparta and other Greek states opposed to Athenian dominance, effectively using Persian wealth to fuel the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta.
Playing the Greeks against each other.
Precisely. This culminated eventually in the so-called Peace of Calais around 449 BC, which, while its exact terms are debated, seems to have formalized mutual spheres of influence, essentially acknowledging Athenian dominance in the Aegean Sea while confirming Persian authority in Anatolia. Domestically, Artaxerxes I faced the perennial challenge of powerful satraps. He continued using methods like appointing royal princes to key satrapies, using the eyes and ears of the king, and rotating officials to prevent them building independent power bases. But court life definitely grew more complex, with restricted access to the king and, reportedly, increased political influence wielded by figures within the royal harem and powerful eunuchs.
And after his long reign, this succession wasn't smooth.
No. After Artaxerxes I's reign of about 41 years, a brief but messy succession struggle ensued in 424 BC. His son, Xerxes II, ruled for just 45 days before being assassinated by a half-brother, Sogdianus. Sogdianus himself lasted only about 6 months before being overthrown by another half-brother who took the throne as Darius II.
That instability hints at weakening mechanisms for orderly succession.
It certainly does. Darius II ruled for about 19 years. He continued the policy of deep involvement in Greek affairs, firmly supporting Sparta financially in the later stages of the Peloponnesian War, which ultimately helped Sparta defeat Athens. But internally, powerful satraps like Tissaphernes and Phronibazus, who governed the crucial western Anatolian provinces, seemed to have operated with increasing autonomy, making their own treaties and policies, indicating a definite erosion of central control, even if the empire held together.
And court intrigues continued.
Intensified, if anything. Darius II's wife, Queen Persipolis, exercised enormous influence, particularly regarding the succession. Her favorite younger son, Cyrus, known as Cyrus the Younger to distinguish him from the founder, was given extraordinary authority and command over Persian forces in western Anatolia. This favoritism sowed the seeds for future conflict.
Which leads directly to Cyrus the Younger's famous rebellion against his older brother, Artaxerxes II, who succeeded Darius II. This sounds like a major civil war.
It was a major crisis. When Darius II died in 404 BC, his eldest son took the throne as Artaxerxes II, but Cyrus the Younger, ambitious and feeling perhaps cheated of the throne, decided to challenge him. He used his position in Anatolia to secretly assemble a large army, crucially including a contingent of about 10,000 elite Greek mercenary hoplites.
The 10,000 Greeks, immortalized by Xenophon.
Exactly. Xenophon, one of their commanders, wrote a famous account called the Anabasis, detailing their campaign and incredible march home after the rebellion failed. The two brothers met in battle at Chronaxa, near Babylon, in 401 BC. Cyrus fought bravely, even wounding his brother, but was killed in the fighting. His rebellion instantly collapsed.
What did this episode reveal about the state of the empire?
Two key things. Firstly, the growing factionalism and willingness of powerful members of the imperial elite to resort to civil war. Secondly, the increasing reliance on Greek mercenaries for critical military operations. These weren't just auxiliaries anymore, they were often the core of the fighting force, which was expensive and politically risky.
And Artaxerxes II, despite winning, faced continued instability.
He did. His long reign, nearly 46 years, was marked by continued challenges. Egypt successfully regained its independence around 390 BC and managed to stay independent for about 60 years. There were also periodic revolts by satraps in various parts of the empire, known as the Great Satraps' Revolt, though these often collapsed due to internal rivalries among the rebels themselves rather than decisive action from the center. Court politics remained incredibly volatile. Artaxerxes II reportedly had over 100 sons by various wives and concubines, creating a nightmare scenario for succession conflicts.
And then came Artaxerxes III, who sounds like he briefly managed to reverse the decline through sheer ruthlessness and competence.
He certainly did. Taking the throne in 358 BC, Artaxerxes III immediately demonstrated both qualities. He secured his position by systematically executing numerous potential rivals within the royal family, dozens of brothers, half-brothers, and other relatives. Having consolidated power, he proved to be an energetic and capable ruler. His most significant achievement was personally leading a massive military campaign in 343 BC that finally reconquered Egypt, ending its 60 years of independence.
So the empire could still project significant power when needed.
Absolutely. It showed that the military machine, particularly when led decisively, remained formidable. However, despite this major success, the underlying foundations of imperial power continued to erode. Greek mercenaries still formed the backbone of the best imperial armies, draining the treasury and creating forces whose loyalty was ultimately to their paymaster, not necessarily the empire itself. The satrapal system showed increasing dysfunction, with some governors ruling almost as virtual kings in their territories, and court politics remained lethal.
Lethal indeed. Artaxerxes III himself fell victim to it.
Yes. Despite his successes, or perhaps because of his ruthlessness, he was assassinated in 338 BC. The plot was orchestrated by his powerful eunuch vizier, Bagoas, who seems to have preferred weaker rulers he could control. Bagoas then placed Artaxerxes III's youngest son, Arses, on the throne as a puppet. When Arses attempted to assert his independence and possibly planned to eliminate Bagoas, Bagoas had him and his entire family poisoned as well.
Incredible. So Bagoas was effectively ruling.
For a brief period, it seems so. After eliminating Arses, Bagoas needed a new figurehead. He elevated a distant cousin of the royal line, a man who had apparently distinguished himself as a military commander, who took the throne, named Darius III in 336 BC.
And Darius III, the last Achaemenid monarch, barely had time to settle in and eliminate the kingmaker Bagoas before facing an entirely new and unexpected threat from the west.
Exactly. Darius III seems to have quickly realized the danger Bagoas posed and had him executed. But he had barely secured his own position when news arrived of a threat emerging from a direction few would have anticipated as serious just a few years earlier. Macedon, on the northern fringes of the Greek world. Alexander of Macedon. In the spring of 334 BC, this young king, only about 22 years old, crossed the Hellespont from Europe into Asia with an army of approximately 40,000 highly trained troops. Alexander commanded a reformed Macedonian military machine, combining the disciplined phalanx infantry, heavy companion cavalry used as a shock force, light infantry, and sophisticated siege capabilities that was arguably the most effective fighting force the world had yet seen.
And Persia was maybe not at its strongest moment to face such a challenge.
It seems like a convergence of factors. Darius III was new and relatively untested on the throne. Imperial finances were likely strained after decades of internal conflict and reliance on mercenaries. Satrapal efficiency and loyalty in some key provinces, especially Western Anatolia, might have been reduced. And Alexander had the advantage of significant intelligence about the Persian Empire, partly thanks to Greek observers like Xenophon, whose Anabasis provided detailed accounts of the empire's interior and military.
So a perfect storm. Alexander's exceptional military leadership and reformed army hitting Persia at a moment of relative weakness and perhaps overconfidence.
That seems a fair assessment. The first major confrontation came quickly at the Battle of the Granicus River in northwest Anatolia in 334 BC. The local Persian satraps hastily assembled a force, perhaps around 20,000 troops, including Greek mercenaries. They chose a defensive position on the riverbank.
And Alexander won.
Decisively. Alexander's forces prevailed due to superior tactical coordination and Alexander's own daring leadership, personally leading the cavalry charge across the river, though he himself nearly died in the initial melee. This victory opened up much of western Anatolia to him.
Darius III had to respond personally then.
Yes. The following year, 333 BC, Darius III mobilized the main imperial army, gathering troops from across the empire, likely numbering well over 100,000. He marched west to confront Alexander directly. They met at Issus, near the border of modern Turkey and Syria.
A much larger Persian army.
Yeah.
But the terrain was a problem.
Darius made a crucial error. He positioned his massive army in relatively narrow terrain between the mountains and the sea. This largely neutralized his numerical advantage, preventing him from outflanking Alexander's smaller force. The battle was hard fought, but at a critical moment, when Alexander's elite companion cavalry broke through the Persian lines and threatened Darius's personal position, Darius panicked.
He fled.
He turned his chariot and fled the battlefield, abandoning his army, his camp, and even his own family, his mother, wife, and daughters, who were captured by Alexander. This act severely damaged Persian morale and Darius's own prestige. Alexander, notably, treated the captured royal women with respect and courtesy, a politically astute move that contrasted sharply with Darius's flight.
And Alexander strategically didn't immediately pursue Darius deep into Persia, did he? He turned south instead, towards the coast.
Correct. It was a brilliant strategic decision. Instead of plunging immediately into the vast Persian interior after the fleeing king, Alexander turned south to secure the vital coastal regions of the eastern Mediterranean, Phoenicia, Syria, and Egypt. This would neutralize the Persian fleet, secure his supply lines, and protect his rear before the final confrontation.
This involved some tough sieges, like Tyre.
Very tough. He undertook the grueling 7-month siege of the island city of Tyre in 332 BC. Tyre resisted stubbornly. Alexander eventually took it by building a massive stone causeway or mole from the mainland out to the island, demonstrating immense engineering prowess and relentless determination. Gaza also resisted fiercely and fell after a difficult siege.
And then Egypt. Was there much resistance there?
Virtually none. Alexander entered Egypt later in 332 or early 331 BC and was largely welcomed as a liberator. The Egyptians had only recently been reconquered by Artaxerxes III and resented Persian rule. The Egyptian priests cleverly legitimized Alexander's rule by recognizing him as a pharaoh and, according to some accounts, as the son of the god Amun.
And he founded Alexandria.
Yes, he founded the city of Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast, destined to become a major cosmopolitan hub of trade, learning, and culture for centuries. He also made a famous journey deep into the desert to visit the oracle of the god Ammon, identified with Zeus by the Greeks, at the Siwa oasis. The oracle reportedly acknowledged him as the god's son, further boosting his prestige and perhaps his own sense of destiny.
Okay, so with the entire eastern Mediterranean coast and Egypt secured, his rear protected, and his treasury replenished by captured wealth, Alexander finally turned east to confront Darius III for the last time.
Exactly. In 331 BC, Alexander marched his army into Mesopotamia, heading for the imperial heartland. Darius, in the meantime, had managed to assemble another enormous army, reportedly even larger than the one at Issus, drawing troops from the eastern satrapies. He carefully chose a wide open plain near a village called Gaugamela, east of the Tigris River, specifically selecting terrain where his superior numbers, particularly his cavalry and chariots, could be used to maximum effect.
This is it, the decisive battle for the empire.
It was. The Battle of Gaugamela was one of the largest and most decisive battles of the ancient world. Despite Darius's preparations and numbers, Alexander's tactical genius, the discipline of his Macedonian troops, and the effectiveness of his companion cavalry charge once again proved superior. At a crucial point in the battle, as Alexander's cavalry wedge drove towards the Persian center where Darius was positioned, Darius once again lost his nerve and fled the field.
He fled again. That must have sealed the fate of his army.
It triggered the final collapse of imperial resistance. His army disintegrated. Alexander had won a complete victory. He marched south and took the great cities of Babylon and Susa without significant opposition, capturing the immense royal treasuries stored there.
And then, the controversial burning of Persepolis. Why did that happen?
Alexander's army reached Persepolis, the magnificent ceremonial heart of the Achaemenid Empire, in early 330 BC. After thoroughly looting its vast treasury, the wealth was reportedly so immense it required 20,000 mules and 5,000 camels to transport the magnificent palace complex itself was deliberately set ablaze and destroyed.
Why? Was it an accident? Revenge? Policy?
The exact reasons are still debated by historians. Ancient sources offer different explanations. Some suggest it was an act of revenge for the burning of Athens by Xerxes 150 years earlier, possibly done during a drunken banquet at the urging of Thais, an Athenian courtesan accompanying the army. Others suggest it was a calculated political act, a symbolic statement that the Achaemenid dynasty was truly finished, and that Alexander was now the undisputed ruler, breaking with the past. Whatever the motive, it was a tragic act of destruction that irrevocably damaged one of the ancient world's architectural marvels.
And what became of Darius III himself?
After Gaugamela, Darius fled eastward, hoping perhaps to rally forces in the eastern satrapies like Bactria, but his authority had evaporated. He was eventually betrayed and imprisoned by some of his own remaining followers, led by Bessus, the satrap of Bactria, who perhaps hoped to either use Darius as a bargaining chip or seize power himself. As Alexander's pursuing forces closed in, Bessus had Darius murdered and left dying by the roadside.
Alexander found him.
Alexander's troops found Darius dead or dying. Alexander reportedly covered the body with his own cloak and ordered that Darius be given a royal burial back at Persepolis with his Achaemenid ancestors. He then presented himself not just as a conqueror, but as the legitimate successor to the Persian throne, obligated to avenge the murder of the rightful king. He relentlessly pursued Bessus, captured him, and had him executed as a regicide.
So looking back at this rapid collapse from Granicus to Darius's death in just 4 years, was it purely down to Alexander's genius, or was the empire already terminally ill?
It's a complex question, and the sources maybe lean towards a nuanced reality. The rapid collapse is often cited as evidence of terminal decline. But we should remember, the imperial forces fought effectively at Granicus and Issus. At Gaugamela, Darius could still field an absolutely enormous army drawn from across the empire. The collapse resulted less, perhaps, from a comprehensive institutional failure across the board, and more from the specific confluence of factors at that moment. Existing imperial weaknesses like the recent succession struggles, strained finances, reduced satrapal efficiency in key areas, combined with the arrival of an exceptional military leader in Alexander, commanding an army of unprecedented tactical coordination and capability.
And Alexander's own strategy played role too.
Absolutely. Alexander's strategic brilliance, his speed, his willingness to take risks, and his effective use of both the carrot, respect for local customs when possible, integrating local elites, and the stick, ruthless destruction when resisted, like at Tyre or Persepolis, proved highly effective. Crucially, though, the underlying administrative systems, the communication networks established by Darius I, the basic structures of governance across the provinces, these remained largely intact. Alexander and his successors didn't have to build an empire from scratch. They took over and utilized the existing Achaemenid framework, so it was less a total civilizational collapse and more of a forced, violent political transition at the very top.
And the story of the Persian legacy, of course, continues long after the fall of the Achaemenids. Alexander's empire didn't last long after his death, did it? What happened in Persia during the Hellenistic period that followed?
No, Alexander's empire fragmented almost immediately after his unexpected death in Babylon in 323 BC. His generals, the Diadochi, fought among themselves for control. One of them, Seleucus Nicator, a former cavalry commander under Alexander, eventually secured control of the vast eastern territories, including Mesopotamia, the Iranian plateau, and lands stretching towards India. He founded the Seleucid Empire around 312 BC.
And the Seleucids tried to Hellenize these vast territories, didn't they? Spread Greek culture and language?
They certainly did. They faced this immense challenge. How does a tiny minority of Greeks and Macedonians rule over these vast, ancient, non-Greek populations? Their main strategy was to establish new Greek-style cities, polis, throughout their domains, cities like Seleucia on the Tigris, near modern Baghdad, Antioch in Syria, and many others. These cities had Greek temples, theaters, gymnasiums. Greek became the language of government, the military, and high culture. Greek art, philosophy, and religious practices were actively promoted, especially among the urban elites.
But how successful was this Hellenization effort, particularly on the Iranian plateau itself? Did Persian culture just disappear?
Not at all. This is where the remarkable resilience of Persian culture really shines through. Despite these official efforts at Hellenization, particularly in the cities, Persian cultural resistance, especially in the vast rural areas and highland regions, was significant. Local populations largely maintain their traditional Iranian languages, precursors to modern Farsi. Their religious practices, Zoroastrianism in particular, seems to have continued to flourish relatively undisturbed in many areas, and their age-old social customs. The Persian language persisted in everyday use, even without official status, preserving a sense of cultural unity.
So Hellenism was maybe more of a veneer, especially outside the big cities?
To a large extent, yes. It indicates that Persian identity wasn't just tied to the ruling dynasty, the Achaemenids. It was deeply ingrained in the language, religion, and daily lives of the people. The Seleucid Empire itself faced constant challenges holding on to its vast eastern territories. Huge distances, internal conflicts, frequent succession struggles plagued them. While a hybrid Greco-Iranian elite did develop over time, with some Persian nobles adopting elements of Greek culture and serving as intermediaries, the Seleucid grip on the Iranian plateau itself progressively weakened.
And this weakness allowed native Iranian powers to re-emerge.
Exactly. First, the Greco-Bactrian kingdom broke away in Central Asia, establishing an independent Hellenistic state there. More significantly for Persia, a nomadic Iranian tribe from the northeast, the Parthians, began expanding from their homeland around 247 BC under their leader Arsaces I. They gradually started taking control of the Iranian plateau, province by province, pushing the Seleucids back westward. The Seleucids repeatedly tried, but ultimately failed, to recover these lost eastern territories. Their lasting legacy in the East was the spread of Hellenistic urban culture, but their inability to truly penetrate and transform the Iranian heartland allowed Persian traditions to survive and await their chance for revival.
And this sets the stage for the Parthian Empire. How did they differ from the Achaemenids or Seleucids, and what was their unique contribution?
The Parthians, emerging from the semi-nomadic Iranian tribe called the Porni, established an independent kingdom under Arsaces I around 247 BC. This initially small kingdom gradually grew into a powerful empire that effectively revived Iranian political power after centuries of Macedonian and Seleucid rule. They became a major world power, crucially positioned as an intermediary between the Roman Empire expanding in the west and Han Dynasty China flourishing in the east. They controlled a significant portion of the Silk Road trade routes.
And they had a distinctive military style, didn't they? The famous Parthian shot.
Yes, their military was quite different from the infantry-focused armies of the Greeks and Romans. The Parthian army centered almost entirely on cavalry. They had two main types: heavily armored cavalry called cataphracts, covered head to hoof in scale or lamellar armor, and wielding long lances, kantos, functioning as shock troops. And then they had large numbers of highly mobile, lightly armored horse archers using powerful composite bows. They perfected the tactic known as the Parthian shot, feigning retreat on horseback, then suddenly turning in the saddle while galloping away to shoot arrows back at their pursuers. This hit-and-run tactic, combined with the shock charge of the cataphracts, proved incredibly effective against more conventional armies like the Romans, confounding them with their mobility and firepower.
What about their political structure? Was it centralized like the Achaemenids?
No, it was quite different. Unlike the highly centralized Achaemenid state, the Parthian political structure seems to have resembled a kind of feudal system. The Arsacid king, the king of kings, ruled, but he relied heavily on the support of powerful regional noble families who maintained their own territories, castles, and substantial military forces. This system ensured the loyalty of the local elites, who had a stake in the empire, but it also frequently led to chronic succession disputes and internal rivalries among these powerful nobles.
Did they try to restore Persian traditions?
Yes, consciously so. The Parthians presented themselves as the restorers of Iranian traditions after the period of Hellenistic dominance. They revived Zoroastrian religious practices, supported local Iranian customs, and gradually reintroduced Persian administrative systems using Middle Persian, Pahlavi, alongside Greek in their administration. However, they were also pragmatic. They readily incorporated useful Hellenistic elements when it suited them, for example. Their early coins often had Greek inscriptions, and their art shows a fascinating blend of Iranian and Greek styles. Their main capital eventually became Ctesiphon, located near modern Baghdad on the Tigris River, strategically positioned for trade routes and defense against Rome.
And they famously became Rome's great rival in the East.
Absolutely. Parthian forces regularly clashed with Roman armies along their shared frontier, primarily in Mesopotamia and Armenia, for centuries. Their most spectacular military success against Rome was the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC. A Parthian army, primarily composed of horse archers led by a general named Cyrene, annihilated a large Roman army under the command of Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of the richest men in Rome and part of the first triumvirate with Caesar and Pompey. Crassus was killed, and several Roman legionary standards, eagles, were captured, a profound humiliation for Rome. These captured standards were kept by the Parthians for decades, a constant symbol of their victory. This defeat firmly established the Parthians as Rome's most formidable eastern rival, a power that Rome could rarely defeat decisively.
And they were players on the Silk Road, too.
Key players. Chinese historical records, which refer to the Parthian Empire as Anxi, describe diplomatic missions and extensive trade relations along the Silk Road. The Parthians controlled the overland routes connecting the Roman world with China, profiting immensely from this trade in silk, spices, and other luxury goods. Culturally, it was a period of fusion, too. The worship of Mithra, an ancient Iranian solar deity associated with contracts and warfare, became very popular within the empire and eventually spread westward, inspiring the Roman mystery religion of Mithraism, which became particularly popular among Roman soldiers.
So the Parthians ruled for almost 500 years, a very long time. But eventually they too were overthrown by another native Persian dynasty, the Sassanids, who consciously positioned themselves as the true heirs to Achaemenid glory.
That's right. After centuries of Parthian rule, which perhaps became perceived as decentralized and maybe even too influenced by Hellenism by some, a new, vigorously Persian dynasty emerged from the province of Fars, the very same region where Cyrus the Great had originated. A local ruler named Ardashir, claiming descent from a figure named Sesson, hence Sassanian, defeated the last Parthian king, Artabanus IV, in battle around 224 AD. Ardashir founded the Sassanian Empire, which would rule Persia for over 4 centuries until the Arab conquests.
And how did the Sassanians differ from the Parthians? They were more centralized.
Much more centralized. Unlike the looser, almost feudal confederation of the Parthians, the Sassanians deliberately set out to create a highly centralized bureaucratic state. They very consciously connected themselves to the glorious past of the Achaemenids, reviving dormant Persian traditions, titles, and imperial ideology. A key element of this was religion.
Zoroastrianism became much more prominent.
Yes, Zoroastrianism was elevated to the status of the official state religion in a way it hadn't quite been under the Parthians. A powerful, organized Zoroastrian priesthood emerged, closely allied with the throne. Fire temples, the focal points of Zoroastrian worship, were established throughout the empire, and the priests gained unprecedented political influence. There was this explicit ideology linking the legitimacy of the Sassanian throne and the altar.
And they also expressed this renewed Persian identity through grand architecture, like the Takht Khazra at Ctesiphon.
Absolutely. Sasanian cities like Ardashir's new circular city of Firuzabad, Bishapur with its Roman-influenced mosaics, and the greatly expanded Parthian capital of Ctesiphon showcased impressive Persian engineering and artistic achievement. The most famous surviving monument is the Takhazra, the massive palace audience hall at Ctesiphon. Its enormous vaulted brick arch, spanning about 27 meters or 85 feet, remains the largest single-span unreinforced brick arch in the world. It's a testament to Sasanian architectural ambition. They also carved massive rock reliefs at sites like Nakshi Rustam near Persepolis, explicitly depicting Sasanian kings triumphing over Roman emperors, directly linking their own sovereignty to the ancient imperial traditions buried nearby.
And their military was also formidable, continuing the cavalry focus.
They built upon Parthian foundations, but perhaps created an even more effective military. The core remained the heavily armored cavalry, the Savaran or cataphracts, but they seem to have developed better coordination between heavy cavalry, horse archers, infantry, and even war elephants, which they frequently used. Sasanian military techniques, armor, and equipment had a significant influence on their main rivals, the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire, and arguably even on the development of medieval European heavy cavalry, the knights.
And their rivalry with Rome, or rather the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire, became the defining feature of this era in the Near East.
It really did. The Sasanians became the primary adversary of the Roman and later Byzantine Empire for over 400 years. There was this constant grinding back-and-forth warfare, interspersed with periods of tense peace, primarily fought over control of Mesopotamia, Armenia, and the Caucasus frontier. One of the early Sasanian kings, Shapur I, achieved a truly monumental victory in 260 AD. He actually defeated and captured the Roman Emperor Valerian in battle. This was a unique and utterly humiliating event in Roman history, and Shapur proudly immortalized it in those grand rock carvings.
Wow, capturing a Roman emperor. That's unprecedented. But the Sasanian era wasn't just about warfare, was it? It seems to have been a period of significant cultural and intellectual flourishing as well.
Very much so. It was a golden age for many aspects of Persian culture. The famous academy at Gundishapur in southwestern Iran became a major international center of learning, particularly renowned for medicine. Scholars there translated and synthesized medical knowledge from Greek, Indian, and indigenous Iranian traditions. Philosophy, astronomy, and mathematics also flourished.
And some familiar games originated then.
It's believed that the game of chess, known then as chatrang in Middle Persian, as well as backgammon, nard, and possibly the sport of polo, either originated or were formalized and popularized under Sasanian patronage. Jewish scholarly life also thrived, particularly in Mesopotamia under Sasanian rule, leading to the compilation of the hugely important Babylonian Talmud during this period. It was also the era when Manichaeism emerged, a new world religion founded by the prophet Mani, attempting to synthesize Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and Buddhism, though Mani himself and his followers later faced persecution from the Zoroastrian establishment.
So a powerful, culturally vibrant empire. But then, like the Achaemenids before them, a combination of factors led to their eventual and rather sudden collapse. What happened?
The final decades were tumultuous. In the early 7th century, the Sasanian king Khosrow II Parvez launched a massive, initially successful invasion of the Byzantine Empire. For a time, Sasanian armies conquered Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and much of Anatolia, even reaching the gates of Constantinople. It looked like they might actually destroy the Byzantine Empire.
But it didn't last.
No. The Byzantine Emperor Heraclius mounted a brilliant and daring counteroffensive, striking deep into Persia itself. This prolonged, mutually exhausting war, combined with the devastating impact of a major plague, known as the Plague of Shiro, that swept through Mesopotamia around 628 AD, and possibly pressure from Turkic groups on the northeastern frontier, severely weakened both empires. Khosrow II was overthrown and murdered by his own nobles in 628 AD.
And this plunged the Sasanian state into chaos.
Utter chaos. A rapid succession of weak rulers, internal power struggles, and civil war followed. This internal collapse left the realm fatally vulnerable at precisely the wrong moment. Emerging from the Arabian Peninsula, Arab Muslim forces, unified by the new faith of Islam and fueled by religious zeal and military dynamism, struck Persia at this moment of its greatest weakness.
The Arab conquests.
Yes. In a series of key battles, most famously the Battle of Qadisiyah around 636 AD and the Battle of Nahawand in 642 AD, often called the Victory of Victories by the Arabs, the Arab Muslim armies decisively defeated the main Sassanian military forces. The last Sassanian emperor, Yazdegerd III, became a fugitive fleeing eastward. He was eventually tracked down and killed in the remote province of Merv in modern Turkmenistan in 651 AD, bringing the illustrious Sassanian dynasty and with it millennia of independent Persian imperial rule to an end.
A dramatic end. Yet, remarkably, even after this conquest and the fall of their empire, Persian culture and identity didn't just vanish. There were incredible continuities, weren't there?
Yeah.
How did Persian influence survive and even thrive under Islamic rule?
It's one of the most fascinating aspects of this entire story, the resilience and adaptability of Persian culture. Even though Persia was conquered politically and incorporated into the rapidly expanding Islamic Caliphate, its influence continued almost immediately. The new Arab rulers, while bringing their own religion and language, found they needed the sophisticated administrative machinery of the Sassanian state to govern their vast new territories.
So they adopted Persian methods.
Heavily. The early Islamic Caliphate's administrative practices, its bureaucratic structures, court ceremonies, taxation systems, even styles of dress and royal titulature drew significantly on Sassanian precedents. Experienced Persian administrators, scribes, and officials, many of whom converted to Islam over time, continued to staff the administration, essentially running the day-to-day business of the empire for their new Arab masters.
A kind of continuity behind the scenes.
Exactly. And beyond administration, Persian literary and artistic traditions, while adapting to the new Islamic context, maintain many pre-Islamic elements. This deep cultural reservoir allowed for a remarkable cultural revival later on. The very concept of Iran or Persia as a distinct cultural and historical entity, transcending political boundaries, survived the end of its political independence. Its deep roots allowed it to adapt, integrate, and ultimately profoundly influence the civilization that had conquered it.
So Persia became integrated into the caliphate, but its influence continued, even growing within the new Islamic world order.
Precisely. After the Sassanian fall, Persia became a province, a very large and important one within the successive Islamic caliphates, first the Rashidun, then the Umayyads, whose capital was far away in Damascus, Syria. Initially, the Umayyad rulers tended to maintain distinctions between Arab Muslims and non-Arab converts, Mawali, with Persians often relegated to a kind of second-class status despite their crucial administrative roles.
But that changed dramatically with the Abbasids.
Hugely. The Abbasid Revolution in 750 AD, which overthrew the Umayyads, actually began in Khorasan, a vast province in northeastern Persia, encompassing parts of modern Iran, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. It was led significantly by Abu Muslim, himself a Persian convert to Islam. The revolution succeeded, and the Abbasids shifted the political center of the caliphate eastward. They built a new capital, Baghdad, strategically located near the old Sassanian capital of Ctesiphon in Mesopotamia.
And the Abbasids fully embraced Persian culture and expertise. This sounds like that conquest from within you mentioned.
It truly was. The Abbasid caliphs, perhaps recognizing the need for Persian support and administrative skill, fully embraced Persian cultural sophistication. Persian converts rose to the highest levels of government, the military, and intellectual life. The caliphal court in Baghdad adopted many Persian customs, ceremonies, styles of dress, and crucially, relied heavily on Persian administrative practices, often modeled directly on Sassanian systems. It was a remarkable fusion where Persian identity not only survived but evolved and deeply embedded itself within the heart of the broader Islamic civilization.
And this period under the Abbasids was a time of incredible knowledge transfer and cultural flourishing, wasn't it? The Islamic Golden Age.
Absolutely. The Abbasids sponsored a massive translation movement centered in Baghdad's House of Wisdom, Beit al-Hikmah. Scholars translated vast amounts of scientific, medical, philosophical, and literary works from Greek, Sanskrit, from India, and Middle Persian, Pahlavi, into Arabic. This preserved ancient knowledge and laid the foundation for the spectacular intellectual achievements of the Islamic Golden Age.
And a new form of the Persian language, Farsi, emerged during this time as well. How did that develop?
Yes, alongside Arabic as the language of religion and administration, a new form of the Persian language, known as New Persian or Farsi, began to emerge as a literary language. It evolved from Middle Persian but was written using the Arabic script and incorporated a significant number of Arabic loanwords, particularly for religious and abstract concepts. However, crucially, it retained its underlying Indo-European grammar and structure, making it distinct from Arabic.
And this New Persian became a major literary language in its own right.
It rapidly developed into an incredibly sophisticated and flexible literary language. It spread far beyond the borders of Persia itself, becoming a language of culture, poetry, administration, and diplomacy across large parts of Central Asia, South Asia, under empires like the Mughals, and Western Asia, including the Ottoman Empire to some extent. Persian scholars writing in both Arabic and this new Persian made groundbreaking contributions. Figures like Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, whose name gives us the word algorithm, and who introduced Hindu-Arabic numerals and algebra to the West, or Abu Ali ibn Sina, known in Europe as Avicenna, a polymath who wrote seminal works on medicine and philosophy, operated within this vibrant intellectual environment shaped by Persian traditions.
Then moving forward, we see the emergence of the Samanid dynasty. They were significant because they were the first truly independent Persian dynasty to rule in the region after the Arab conquest, right?
Yes, the Samanids were very important. Emerging in the northeastern frontiers, in Transoxiana and Khorasan, roughly 819-999 CE, they were technically governors for the Abbasid caliphs, but ruled with virtual independence. They explicitly embraced and promoted Persian cultural heritage, but did so firmly within an Islamic framework. It was a conscious revival.
How did they symbolize this?
You can see it, for instance, on their coins. They often featured Arabic religious inscriptions on one side, affirming their Islamic faith, but ancient Sasanian or Persian symbols on the other side, linking themselves to the pre-Islamic past. Their capital, Bukhara in modern Uzbekistan, became a major cultural and intellectual center, rivaling Baghdad, sometimes called the Dome of Islam.
And they played a key role in elevating the status of the new Persian language.
Absolutely crucial. The Samanids actively elevated New Persian, Farsi, to the status of a high literary language. They deliberately sponsored Persian poets and writers, commissioned translations of important works from Arabic into Persian, and generally fostered an environment where Persian became not just a spoken language, but a prestigious medium for high culture, administration, and even Islamic learning alongside Arabic. This literary renaissance produced figures like Rudaki, often considered the father of Persian poetry. It was also under Samanid patronage that the collection and recording of ancient Persian legends, myths, and historical traditions began, which formed the crucial source material for Ferdowsi's monumental epic poem, the Shahnameh.
The Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. That epic really codified Persian history and identity for generations to come.
Immensely important. It retold the stories of Persia's mythical and historical kings and heroes, from the creation of the world down to the Arab conquest, all in beautiful Persian verse. It became the national epic, embedding a sense of shared history and cultural identity deep within the Persian consciousness.
This cultural continuity is truly remarkable. And then came another wave of conquerors, the Seljuk Turks, introducing what's called the Turco-Persian synthesis. How did this impact the region? Did the Turks impose their own culture?
This is another fascinating example of Persia's cultural power. Nomadic Turkic warriors, the Seljuks, swept into Iran and the wider Middle East from Central Asia in the 11th century, establishing a vast empire. However, rather than imposing their own nomadic Turkic culture and language, except in the military sphere, the Seljuk rulers quickly adopted and absorbed Persian administrative systems, bureaucratic methods, court practices, art, architecture, and, significantly, the Persian language itself as a language of administration and high culture.
So the Turkic rulers became Persianized.
Largely, yes. This created a unique blend, this Turco-Persian synthesis, which combined Turkic military strength and political dominance with Persian governmental expertise and cultural sophistication. It became a highly successful and influential model, a template for numerous subsequent Islamic states across Persia, Anatolia, Central Asia, and India for centuries. Persian remained the primary language of bureaucracy, literature, and polite society, even under Turkic dynasties.
So yet another example of Persia transforming its conquerors from within. But then came a truly devastating event, the Mongol catastrophe in the 13th century. This sounds like it would have finally broken that cultural continuity.
The Mongol invasions, led first by Genghis Khan and then his grandson Hulagu Khan, were on an entirely different scale of brutality and destruction compared to previous conquests. They swept across Persia and the Islamic world in the 13th century, leaving devastation in their wake. Cities were razed, populations massacred, libraries and mosques destroyed. The intricate qanat irrigation systems, the very basis of agriculture in many parts of Persia, were deliberately ruined, leading to long-term depopulation and economic decline in some regions. The sack of Baghdad by Hulagu in 1258, which ended the Abbasid Caliphate, is often seen as the symbolic end of the classical Islamic Golden Age. It was a true catastrophe.
It sounds utterly devastating. How could Persian culture possibly recover from that?
It seems almost unbelievable, but remarkably it did. Even the Mongols, the ultimate destroyers, eventually succumbed to the cultural gravity of Persia. Incredibly, within just 2 or 3 generations, the Mongol rulers of Persia, the Ilkhanate dynasty, began to convert to Islam, often embracing Sufism, the mystical branch of Islam which had deep roots in Persian culture, and they started to patronize Persian art, architecture, science, and literature.
The conquerors were conquered culturally yet again.
In a very real sense, yes. The period of Mongol rule, despite its horrific beginnings, also saw the establishment of the Pax Mongolica, a period of relative peace and stability across the vast Eurasian landmass controlled by the Mongol Empire. This facilitated unprecedented levels of trade and travel along the Silk Road. Perhaps paradoxically, this period of foreign rule inadvertently created conditions for another remarkable Persian cultural renaissance. Persian miniature painting reached new heights, historical writing flourished, like the work of Rashid al-Din, and great poets like Saadi and Hafez produced timeless masterpieces under Mongol or subsequent Turco-Mongol patronage.
That resilience is just astonishing. And this eventually leads us to the Safavid Empire, which really defined modern Iranian identity in many ways, particularly religiously.
Yes, the Safavids mark a major turning point. In 1501, a charismatic young leader named Shah Ismail Sars, head of a militant Sufi religious order, conquered Persia and founded the Safavid Empire. He made a truly revolutionary and historically momentous decision. He declared Twelver Shia Islam the official state religion of Persia.
This was huge because most of the surrounding Islamic world was Sunni.
Exactly. Most Persians at the time were likely Sunni, like their neighbors, the powerful Ottoman Empire to the west and the Uzbeks to the northeast. Ismail's imposition of Shia Islam, sometimes quite forcefully, created a sharp and often hostile religious divide between Persia and its Sunni neighbors. This sparked centuries of intermittent warfare, particularly with the Ottomans, and it profoundly shaped Persia's distinct identity and its relationship with the rest of the Middle East, a legacy that continues right down to the present day.
So the Safavids established a strong, centralized state with its distinct Shia religious identity. Was the administration still Persian?
Yes. While the early Safavid military relied heavily on the Qizilbash, loyal Turkic tribal warriors, the administration, bureaucracy, and high culture remained firmly Persian. The Safavid Shahs consciously linked themselves to the legacy of the ancient Persian kings, skillfully weaving together Islamic, specifically Shia, and pre-Islamic Persian traditions and symbols to create a powerful new Iranian national identity.
And the empire reached its peak under Shah Abbas I, known as the Great. What were his major accomplishments?
Shah Abbas I, who reigned from 1588 to 1629, is considered the greatest Safavid ruler. He modernized the military, creating a standing army loyal directly to him, reducing reliance on the fractious Qizilbash tribes. He fought successfully against the Ottomans and Uzbeks, regaining lost territories. He moved the capital from Qazvin to Isfahan and transformed Isfahan into one of the most beautiful cities in the world, centered around the magnificent Nashi Jahan Square, Imam Square today, surrounded by stunning mosques, palaces, and the Grand Bazaar. He also fostered a thriving economy, promoting trade, particularly in Persian carpets and silk, which became world-renowned.
And this was another golden age for Persian arts?
Absolutely. The Safavid period saw remarkable cultural flowering, especially in architecture, manuscript illumination, miniature painting, calligraphy, ceramics, and carpet weaving. Safavid art developed a distinctive, elegant style that is highly prized. Perhaps their most profound and lasting legacy, though, was the consolidation of that distinctly Iranian national identity, centered on the Persian language and Twelver Shia Islam, an identity that has proven incredibly durable.
And then, after the Safavids, Persia entered a more turbulent period, with later dynasties leading into the modern era.
Yes, the Safavid Empire eventually collapsed due to internal weaknesses and an Afghan invasion in 1722. This led to a period of chaos and fragmentation. From this emerged short-lived but significant dynasties like the Achaemenids, founded by the brilliant military conqueror Nader Shah, who briefly restored Persia's borders and even famously plundered Mughal Delhi in India. Then came the Zands, under the relatively benevolent Karim Khan Zand, who uniquely rejected the title of Shah, preferring to be called Vakil al-Ra'aya, or Advocate of the People, and focused on rebuilding and domestic improvements, ruling from Shiraz.
And then the Qajar dynasty, who ruled up until the early 20th century, they faced new challenges from European powers.
The Qajar dynasty unified Iran again in 1796 and ruled until 1925. Their era was marked by increasing pressure from the rising European colonial powers, particularly Tsarist Russia to the north and Great Britain, acting from India to the east and south. Despite never being formally colonized like many of its neighbors, Iran lost vast territories under the Qajars, notably the Caucasus regions, modern Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, to Russia through treaties like Golistan and Turkmenchay. It also faced what historians call soft imperialism, economic exploitation through concessions, political interference, and intense rivalry between Russia and Britain for influence over the weakened Qajar state.
But this period also saw a rise in national consciousness.
Yes, paradoxically, this pressure from foreign powers also fueled a revival of Iranian national pride, often expressed through literature and a renewed interest in pre-Islamic history. This culminated in the Constitutional Revolution of 1905-1906, a remarkable popular movement that forced the Qajar Shah to grant a constitution and establish a parliament, majlis, a truly revolutionary development aimed at limiting royal power and resisting foreign influence.
And finally, this leads to the Pahlavi dynasty in the 20th century, aiming to radically modernize Iran.
Exactly. The Qajar dynasty was eventually overthrown in 1925 by Reza Khan, a former Cossack military officer who crowned himself Reza Shah Pahlavi, founding the Pahlavi dynasty. Inspired by the secularizing and modernizing reforms of Ataturk in neighboring Turkey, Reza Shah aimed to transform Iran into a strong, centralized, modern, and westernized nation-state. He focused on building national infrastructure, like the Trans-Iranian Railway, establishing modern secular schools, creating a unified national army loyal to him, and often suppressing traditional sources of power like the clergy and tribal leaders. This entire long, sweeping history from those first nomadic tribes adapting to the plateau through millennia of empires rising and falling reveals this incredible, persistent thread of continuity that speaks volumes about the enduring nature of Persian identity and its profound influence on world history.
It's an absolutely epic story. So let's try to pull some threads together. What does this all mean for the enduring impact and relevance of the Persian Empire in all its phases today? What are the key legacies?
Well, there are quite a few, and they touch on many aspects of civilization. Firstly, that model of governance. The administrative framework established way back by Darius the the satrapy system with its checks and balances, the efficient communication network like the royal road, the standardized currency, it provided a remarkably effective blueprint for managing vast, multi-ethnic territories.
And it was copied or adapted by later empires.
Absolutely. Alexander the Great basically took over the Achaemenid system. The Seleucids adapted it. Even the early Islamic Caliphate borrowed heavily from Sassanian administrative practices, which themselves were heirs to the Achaemenid model.
Yeah.
It demonstrated a successful approach to large-scale imperial administration.
And the physical infrastructure they built, some of it literally endured for millennia. That's a powerful physical legacy.
It really is. Roads like the Royal Road, or segments of it, remained crucial communication and trade routes for centuries after the Achaemenids fell. And perhaps most astonishingly, many of those qanats, the underground water channels, first developed by the early Iranians and greatly expanded under the Achaemenids and later dynasties, continue functioning today. Some have been in continuous use for over 2,500 years. They might be the longest-serving major human-built infrastructure on Earth. Think about that.
Incredible. And cities they founded or developed.
Many cities founded or significantly developed under imperial Persian patronage, places like Alexandria in Egypt, founded by Alexander but in a former Persian territory, Kandahar in Afghanistan, also linked to Alexander-Persian precedents. Bukhara and Samarkand in Central Asia maintain their importance as major urban centers across successive political changes, often serving as hubs for trade and culture for centuries.
What about artistic and architectural influence? Did that spread beyond Persia's borders?
Definitely. Sasanian Persian textile patterns, for example, were highly prized and show up in Byzantine silks and even further west. That distinctive four-part walled garden design, the Chahar-Bagh, which originated with the Achaemenids' Paradisha, spread widely influencing garden design in Mughal India. Think of the Taj Mahal gardens, Central Asia, and even Moorish Spain, like the Alhambra. Architectural elements, like the huge vaulted halls of Hans, perfected by the Sassanians at places like Tat Khazra, became fundamental features of later Islamic mosque and palace architecture across the Middle East and beyond. And the sheer artistic achievement and multicultural integration represented by Persepolis still astounds archaeologists and visitors today.
And perhaps one of the most profound, though maybe less visible, legacies is in the realm of religious concepts. You mentioned Zoroastrianism's influence.
This is arguably one of the most significant yet often overlooked contributions. Core concepts from Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian religion, emphasizing the cosmic struggle between good, Ahura Mazda, and evil, Ahriman. The idea of a linear progression of time towards a final judgment, concepts of heaven and hell, bodily resurrection, and the coming of a future savior or messiah figure seem to have profoundly influenced Judaism during the period of the Babylonian exile and the subsequent Achaemenid period when Jews returned under Persian patronage.
And through Judaism, these ideas entered other major world religions.
Exactly. These concepts subsequently entered Christianity and Islam, shaping the fundamental theological frameworks of faiths whose adherents today number in the billions. It's a staggering intellectual and spiritual legacy. Even the familiar story of the Magi, or wise men visiting the infant Jesus, in the nativity story, the Magi were Zoroastrian priests from Persia.
That's a connection many people probably don't realize. What about linguistic legacy? Did Persian spread its words around?
Oh, extensively. Persian vocabulary entered languages across Eurasia. Turkish, Urdu, Hindi, Armenian, Georgian, even Swahili in East Africa absorbed Persian loanwords, often related to administration, trade, or culture. And remember, the administrative language used by the Achaemenids. They adopted Aramaic as a lingua franca across their vast empire. This widespread use of Aramaic script and language heavily influenced the development of many later Middle Eastern scripts, including the Hebrew and Arabic alphabets, and then the emergence of New Persian, Farsi, as that sophisticated literary and cultural language under the Sassanids and later dynasties cemented its influence across a vast region for over 1,000 years.
Looking at the bigger picture, what stands out is their unique approach to cultural diversity. It seems they figured out something about managing multi-ethnic empires that many others struggled with.
I think that's a really key takeaway. The Achaemenid innovation, largely pioneered by Cyrus, of creating a universal empire that generally accommodated cultural and religious diversity rather than trying to impose uniformity, was revolutionary for its time. This approach, which was continued to varying degrees by later Persian empires like the Sassanians, influenced imperial projects from Rome to the modern era. This recognition that different peoples could maintain their distinct identities, languages, and religions within a shared political community remains a crucial and often challenging framework for multicultural governance even today. It suggests strength can come from managing diversity, not just suppressing it.
And all of this ties into the remarkable persistence of Iranian or Persian identity itself. Despite conquest after conquest, Greeks, Arabs, Turks, Mongols, the identity endured.
Oh. It's truly remarkable. The very concept of Iran as a distinct cultural, linguistic, and historical entity, sometimes independent politically, sometimes not, owes a huge amount to this deep imperial legacy. It was sustained by a consciousness of a shared history, codified by works like the Shahnameh, a shared literary language, Farsi, shared artistic traditions, and certain enduring cultural values. This allowed Iranian identity to survive repeated conquests and political fragmentation, often leading to these incredible periods of cultural revitalization where, as we've seen, Persia ended up culturally absorbing its conquerors. The geographical concept of the Iranian plateau as a distinct heartland also shows remarkable continuity from ancient times right through to the modern nation-state of Iran.
And finally, this deep imperial past inevitably informs how Iran sees itself and how others see it in the context of contemporary geopolitics.
Undoubtedly. An awareness of Iran's long history as a major regional power, its legacy of empire, its cultural influence, and its centuries-long interactions, both cooperative and confrontational, with its neighbors and global powers, all of this informs both internal Iranian self-perception and external perceptions of its role in the world today. It influences diplomatic self-presentation, strategic thinking, and national narratives. It's a history that is very much alive and continues to shape current events.
What an incredible journey. You've just traveled with us through millennia, literally from nomadic tribes adapting to a harsh but formative plateau, right through to visionary empires that reshaped the ancient and medieval worlds, leaving legacies we still live with.
We've seen how innovation, like the qanats for water management, created the foundations for prosperity in a challenging land. We've explored how a revolutionary model of governance, emphasizing tolerance and integration, managed to unify incredibly diverse peoples under the Achaemenids. And we've seen this recurring theme of Persian culture's astonishing resilience, its ability to repeatedly transform its conquerors from within.
That idea of the Pax Persica, the Persian peace established across vast regions under rulers like Cyrus and Darius, fostered agriculture, trade, and cultural development in ways few empires achieved before or since. It really challenges the idea that empires must always rule by force alone.
It suggests that stability, lasting stability, can sometimes be forged not through forced assimilation or eradication of difference, but through the more difficult, perhaps wiser path of accommodation and integration.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. What is the most enduring lesson from the long arc of the Persian Empire isn't just about military might or administrative genius, but about the strength found in tolerance. What if true imperial power lies not just in the ability to conquer, but in the wisdom to integrate, to preserve, and perhaps even to allow for the flourishing of diversity within a larger whole? What else might we learn from a civilization that simply refused to vanish, and instead, through its unique cultural gravity and resilience, became such a lasting, vital thread woven through the entire tapestry of human history?